prefab folding pot.
Uh-huh.
I think that's very interesting because it's a very practical solution for housing in terms of different, I don't know, different situations, and to create something that could be very useful and also not very, to damage the environment. How was the idea of the prefab folding pots?
So we've been for a very long time thinking that, like most art, we have been caught up in the world of what they call luxury projects, luxury apartments, luxury stores, luxury goods. And, you know, it was great and amazing, and we are thankful for having those projects. But I think as architects, we also have social responsibility. And when you realize that most of the projects that you make is really for 1% of the society that can afford it, it's something really disturbing. Um, the number of homeless people, the number of refugees that are living in tents, the number of um, really, people who live in poor conditions is beyond measure, I think. I mean, United Nations every day puts data out so you can Google it and see it for yourself. So our idea was how could we as architects sit and do nothing about it? Because obviously the countries are just going about their own way, and they have no funding, and So the first thing we thought we do is come up with an idea that could be easily prefabricated so we can bring the cost down. And it would be a kind of, if you will, a simple DNA that then can be connected to one another to make larger units for larger families. Like the one that you see in this rendering is actually 2 units put together. And so, and then this idea that architecture should be the same for everyone, because the construction of it is very similar. A luxury building, if you go and look in terms of construction, is the same um, for low-income housing to a luxury housing. The slabs, trust me, are the same thickness because they are minimum in concrete or in steel. Maybe the heights or the volumes become a little bit different. The amount of windows will become different. But construction-wise, more or less, we are really not differing from one to another. And so if that is the case, why can those who don't have much in life, and we feel to have a home is a human right, how could they also have the same? There would be no difference. How could we, in a way, bring democracy into architecture and have the same unit for both luxury, because maybe they can add more, but the same one could be used for someone who doesn't have the means. And so this was the pod. And the way the pod works is based on the art of folding paper or origami. You know, the Japanese origami, how you take one sheet of paper and you fold it. And so we thought this way, if we can put a building together that can be folded, then it can move from one place to another. It could be shipped to areas that we need and so on. So right now we are making a prototype of a kind of more a version of it. It's not exact same one. It's a little bit smaller, which we want to use for disaster relief. Because as we were making this project, there were fires in Australia where people are running without having anywhere to go. and they're surrounded by fire, and there's no way to get to them anything except by ship. There are earthquakes, severe earthquakes all over the world. There is a whole town in Iran that was flooded, that needed shelter. I mean, you just name it, we have it. These, almost climate change issues that we are facing. And again, we all need to come together to resolve, made us to think that we definitely need this kind of what we call a pod, a very basic shelter that we can fold and you can ship or air freight from one place to another. And that is, what we are now getting into what we call a concept prototype. And we are hoping maybe to exhibit it in Venice Biennale, or right now we are talking about potentially even exhibiting it in London Architecture Festival, because it's very important. As we also were studying this pod, we were also studying communities, emerging communities. Maybe the whole planning needs to be revisited and changed. The one that you showed was our Alvan Tower that is in Tehran, and it's very dear to us. Maybe we want to talk about that.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this building in particular because it's in your home country, of course. Right. And I don't know what's going on, but it doesn't. Yeah. There's something wrong with the website, with my internet.
Just click on it, and so the tower would come on. No, the projects in the projects. Yeah.
Okay, there it is.
Yeah, there. So this is one of the very few projects we've done in Tehran, and it was very, very dear to us. I mean, here we are finally in our own, country of birth, and a place that we understand, a lot about, and, had the opportunity to work with this developer. It's a 12-story office building. It's also one of the very few commercial buildings that we have done. And it's in a very dense urban fabric. It's by a very Argentine square. And so, it's an important project because it's very visible. And our clients wanted something iconic and something that would remain in Iran, for the future architects and future generations to look at. So all the elements were there, and it's a kind of what we did was, it's very few of these kinds of double skin buildings exist in Iran because it's expensive to make. You have an interior kind of facade, and then you have an exterior facade, and it becomes a little bit more costly to make. But they are very important, and we wanted to emphasize that Iran gets a lot of sun, and the amount of energy that is used in cooling office towers that are all or mainly replica of what we get in the United States and in Europe, in the Western world, perhaps is not the only solution. And so for us to cut the amount of sun that comes in, but still allow view, light, and air in, we did this. There is a layer that is glass in the interior, and then there is this brise soleil, or kind of a sun shading device on the exterior. So it became a lot of fun because with the brise soleil we could actually create a pattern. And for the pattern of this building, we studied geometrical, kind of buildings that exist actually in a lot of, again, the tile work of Iran, and a lot of the patterns in the Iranian, art. And so we understood that Iranians believe that the manifestation between intersection of a circle and a square, I think was a representative of the earth, and circle the sky, or is manifestation of paradise. You create a cross where, you know, the Persian paradises, Chaharbagh they call it, is based on that. And so that pattern is reflected on the facade of the exterior skin of the building. And, you know, for us, it creates the paradise in the middle of the chaos and very old, badly needed renovated buildings in the middle of the commercial center in Tehran. What is fascinating is between the two layers, there is a 1 meter space. And this 1 meter space allows not only for the window cleaners to go in between and clean the glass from the outside and clean the facade, but it also allowed us to install LED lighting. So in a way, what is cut out or what is negative at night becomes positive. And it becomes a pattern of lighting tile work. Just like some of those, you know, images that you showed earlier where sun comes in and from the stained glass, you get all these patterns of beautiful colored light in the interior. This time it's the reverse. It's from the layers in between the building's facade, you give it back to the street and the pedestrians to see. It's almost like a piece of jewelry in the middle of that whole area. And it's very visible, and to me it's an icon of future generations of maybe Iranian architecture, something that belongs to there. It has a purpose, and it connects to the culture of you know, Iran.
It's like a piece of jewelry.
It
And you have
is.
also designed jewelry as well. It's true.
Yes.
Well, there's something related to not exactly jewelry, but also fashion, which is something that really amazes me, is the Contemporary Museum of
Yeah.
Muslim fashion.
Right.
I love this. I just adore this grid that you designed. I'm pretty sure it's based on traditional or historical patterns that you can find in Iranian art, I suppose, and you found the inspiration for doing something like this.
Yes, I mean, definitely these kinds of screens, if you will, and patterns on the doorways and, you know, stained windows exist, you know, in all of Middle East, I would say, but also in Iran. And this actually was an exhibition that we designed in San Francisco at the Dion Museum for contemporary Islamic fashions. And it was fantastic experience because Islam is a very large, Islamic world is a very large world that has many different cultures that have their own traditions and have their own, in a way, you know, culture and dress codes and so on. I mean, what you see in Indonesia is very different than what you get in Pakistan, or what you get in Iran, or what you get in Saudi Arabia. And so the challenge was, how could you design a space? How could you design a you know, architecture to include all these countries and bring them together? So for us, the main actually element that all these countries or all these Middle Eastern countries have in common is the element of arch, because arch is a protective element. It's a structural element. When there's an earthquake, they say run under the arch because that's where you're safe. And so we took the element of the arch, but then we deconstructed it. We modernized it, and we brought it as an element that in each part becomes a different, you know, way it's articulated. And you can see it's a full arch, and then as the exhibition goes through, it dematerializes and just becomes part of an arch. It was also celebration of women, celebration of you know, women fashion designers who have a multi-million-dollar now industry just operating basically online, I would say. And so you know that yeah, this lighting pattern. Oh, I experienced this, and I was, you know, I have to. The issue is, Louis. This is the so it was very exciting. It was very controversial because the way people were. I mean, you know, after the Muslim ban in United States, there has been a discussion why one targets one group and one religion and not respect it and understand it. These coverings or most of the costumes that people of the area wear is mainly to protect them from the environment. I mean, it's hot, it's sandy, and it's you know, so men have pretty much the same coverings too. They wear long abayas and they have turbans and so on. Um, Iranians, maybe Iranian women don't have a choice and have to wear the headscarf, which is, I think, um, a problem. I don't support that because it should be a choice if you want to wear the headscarf or not. So this was, in that sense, also very important because we wanted to show the world, the Western world, that you know, this world is not something that is impenetrable. So you can see the existing walls and ceiling of the exhibition is all painted in black. You know, it's almost like a
Yeah.
veil, a black veil that is scary, and you don't know what's behind it and so on in the Western world. But when you go in, everything is white, everything is dynamic, everything is modern, and all the women or mannequins are on a pedestal wearing these beautiful, you know, costumes. So it was very well received. It was, you know, in all the TV stations, and you know, they filmed it. So we are very pleased that we got an opportunity, because every opportunity is also about saying something, about educating the world. We are ambassadors that bring people together through our art, through our culture, through you know, what we create. And you know, and the fact that most of the designers in the exhibition actually were women um, from the Middle East, and then they selected us as you know, kind of women architects to do the exhibition also meant a lot to us,
No,
because a
I'm
lot.
pretty sure.
Yes,
What? I'm sorry. Sorry.
go ahead.
No, I
So
was even. I was just going to say something about architecture. I mean, architecture is about taking chances and making a statement. And I think that the exhibition is quite important because it goes beyond fashion. We can see that it goes beyond the, I don't know, sort of the superficial idea that you could have of fashion. But fashion at the same time is also a statement. It's also a very cultural. I think it's very important to talk about it and how architecture manages to do the same thing. I mean, architecture is like the build testimonial of historic times, economic period, social changes. Anything can be, you know, translated into architecture. So I think it's very important to take the chances and making those statements
right,
in what you create. And I think it's very interesting to see not only in the exhibition of Muslim fashion, but in terms of all your work. And I wanted to ask just two things because I know that we're now we have. I don't want to bother you anymore with these questions and this talk. But there's something very important that you mentioned with the Muslim fashion exhibition, and it's something that we talked before the interview. In terms of, we all know that Middle East has so much culture and so many things we can learn about Middle Eastern culture and arts and creation. So me as an architectural history professor, I usually think that we're also focused on teaching things from the ancient Rome, ancient Greece, which is fine, of course. I won't, I am not against those things. It's fine. But what about Middle East? It's important to learn about all over cultures all over the world. So for you, for example, if I ask you what's the most important thing about Iran, for example, what
Right.
what
I
I know it's a
have
very tough question, but something that you
no, no.
could.
It's actually a very relevant question because we've been thinking about it and talking about it. There are two things that have I think we have to question in teaching of architecture actually to young architects. One is um, the fact that everything that we teach and all the ideas that we are presenting to the schools of architecture is from the point of view of male architects that has existed. I think it's time again to study, to document, and to make sure students of architecture get both points of views.
Mm,
Maybe before it was not possible, but today is definitely possible to have both points of views in terms of architecture and construction of architecture,
yeah.
celebrated and be studied by students. The other one is history. History of architecture, as you mentioned, starts from the Greece, from the Greek time. Hello, Iranians have a culture that is 5,000 years old. China has even a culture that is longer than Iranian culture. I think it's arrogant. I think it's pompous to eliminate the most beautiful cultures in earth because we have no knowledge of it, perhaps, or we think they are not valuable. There is a wisdom in, and look, sustainability has become a fashion of the day today. Iranians have sustainable towns, not just sustainable buildings. I mean, we have towns that are built around
Yeah.
sustainability with the thicknesses of the walls, with the way they bring water and store it on the lower floor, with the way they catch the wind and use it, in cooling their buildings. So without electricity, without ruining our environment. Now, why do we have to learn it from what we have learned? What I have learned from Greek architecture is symbolism of power, how to
Mm,
make these stone tall big columns and 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 make a statement about the power of the country. um, it's fine. I think we need to learn that, we need to understand that, but the organic architecture that is very earth related, very nature related, it lives and is still, I think, worthwhile understanding in many, many different countries. More than that, I think one of the earliest urban spaces is in Iran. The Isfahan, square um, is one of the oldest public squares that existed before even the Europeans and the Greeks and Romans knew anything about having a very large public space, a hole in the
mm,
middle of a town. Um, so um, I come from a point of view that it's time for us to review teaching of architecture because you have to start from the base. You can't just haphazardly do that. And that is, it's time to start teaching students of architecture who are now 80%,
mm,
70% women, how women think about space, how women think about relating to architecture, to our urban fabric, to our streets, and then how do we teach them about what existed before? What is the wisdom of these old cultures that are now maybe buried? They are underneath, but we need to dig out and bring up and showcase and have them learn from it. A lot of Latin American cultures have that. Do we teach that in schools of architecture? Not really. It's a very little, maybe chapter, I don't know, on Mexican or Mayan culture and so on. So I think culture of a place is important. We as architects today, as global practitioners, go to these different countries instead of taking your, you know, your Louis Vuitton bag there, I
Yeah.
think you should go there and see what they have and use their local, you know, kind of culture and local um, traditions in terms of living, in terms of working, and do something unique that is for that place and that culture. And so that's what my hope is for the future generations. You know, as I, you know, discussed with you before, to me, architecture is not a fashion, in fact. Even though fashion and architecture have always had a relationship to one another, it's almost like
Yeah.
the same terminology, you know, the fabric of a building, the exterior, you know, outer wear of the building, the interior of the building, and so on and so forth. But the fact is, it's not about fashion of the day. It's about creating something that is timeless in architecture, because it's a lot of time and effort and money that is spent
Yeah.
on a work to, you know, that has to remain for generations of people to enjoy and for architects to learn from. So these kind of isms that come and go, you know, postmodernism, deconstructivism, you know, those are all about form. And to make a crazy form that then maybe a year or two later no one wants and no one likes, I think is useless. We need to create something again that is always remains, and always when we go we are bewildered and we are, you know, kind of, as you said, actually we are touched, we experience it and we take it with us and it always remains with you. So can one create that with fashion? I think yes. Fashion as an art form has a capacity to do that. And there are things that you keep forever. What they call is, it's a classic, you know. And is, you know, we do it with art, you know. Not every art is art. Not every literature or piece of writing is what we call literature. But some things, you know, remain forever. And
Yeah.
every time you read it is something new and you have a new understanding. So that is, I think, what is at stake here. Louis, are you there? Oh.
No,
Are
yeah, I
we
was
at the
looking
end?
for a,
Are we at the end
yeah,
of? Uh-huh.
I was just looking for a book. In, speaking of things
Uh,
that are timeless, and one of my favorite poets of all time is Khalil Gibran.
uh-huh.
I
Khalil
have this old
Gibran.
book. Yeah,
Yes, yes. I
touched.
have that
Uh,
too. Yes. Or for that matter, Rumi. I mean, I was so surprised that musicians in New York,
yeah,
dancers, create modern performances with poetry of Rumi, who is Iranian. You know, Omar Khayyam, uh, so well known. So there are, there is a work of art that can become universal, that become timeless, and relate to something that we all share. My hope is that one day I can create one of those.
yeah. Completely, totally. Well, I'm very happy for this talk. Extremely happy. You have no idea. I mean, I'm in a mixture between being a starstruck, you know, talking to you right now, and also because it's so.
Louis, you are a professor. I am in awe of you and what you're doing, and also this, you know. Thank
No,
you.
no. I mean, it's been very inspirational because I mean, we have been talking so much about so many important things that to me are extremely relevant right now for architecture. I mean, having the sensibility to understand landscape, for example,
Right.
having the sensibility to understand the people that are going to live in the building, for example, and making living as an experience where you can feel nature, when you can breathe, I don't know, the experience of architecture, considering a building not just bricks and concrete and steel and glass. No,
Correct.
it's a piece
Correct.
of artwork. It's a piece of jewelry
Right.
that it's not only ornamental or something aesthetic. It's something that's useful and helpful, not for just human use, but also for nature, also for environment. I don't know. It's very complex. It's a very
Yeah.
complex field
Yes.
that we're living in.
That's
So
very
that's
true.
why I'm very happy for this interview because it's been like a huge masterclass. How to be, I won't say better architects, but maybe being better people in terms of creating and designing things. And how do we project our knowledge to the world as well? I mean,
Right.
uh, for me, I think the world is completely, there are no boundaries. We have to learn about other cultures. We have to learn about other languages, other experiences, and architecture is like a huge fan,
Yes,
full of
I
colors
totally.
and full
Yes.
of
Right.
culture and full of expression. So
Right.
I always, I always uh, I tell to my students that I always say like, you have to watch films, you have to listen to music, you have to read, you have to take a look at art in general, and only focus on what we are teaching, because architecture is like it's like a huge fan. So
Right.
yeah, okay. Well,
Well,
I
are we kind of getting to the end of our
I,
discussion?
I think so because
Yeah.
I mean I told you it was going to be only a 50-minute talk, and
It, when you start an architect, it never ends. They go
that's
on
true.
and
That's
on
true.
and on. Well, there is so much to talk about these days. But what I wanted to just leave with the young architects, maybe who have joined us, is to be a great architect, you don't have to be kind of mean, pompous, and arrogant. Um, I think, um, in contrast, to be a great architect, you have to be competent, creative, and kind, with a lot of empathy for humanity, with respect for other cultures, for other religions, for other histories, and for the environment, for our climate. Um, so keep that in mind. You don't need to become, because I mean, I've been around for a long time, and I have met so many architects that with one project they think they are such important people and become very um, arrogant human beings. I think it's especially now that we are all experiencing this kind of global pandemic
Mm.
around, and see suffering of people. I think humanity is something that as architects should inspire us, working for humanity and working for create a world that is more human than greed, than you know I want it all and I want this, and competitions, and again this kind of a negative energy. I really think the nature is telling something to us. We are um, rebalancing all the bad things that we have done, all the harm that we have brought to our planet, our earth, um, all the impacts that we have had through gases that are not good for our health, all the buildings that we have that the windows don't open so we don't have fresh air. It's almost, we need lungs, we need to breathe. And if you just for 2 seconds think about it, the best things in life are for free. I mean, we don't pay for water, we don't pay for air to breathe. It's given to us. And for us not to understand how precious they are and how to use it without waste, without with humility, um, I think it's something we need to consider in the future, and especially future generations of architects.
Wow. I was going to ask you that. You read my mind. Okay, to finish this talk, it was just wonderful. Gisue, I have no words to describe how thankful and grateful I am for this talk. I have learned a lot. I think that each and everyone that's been watching this live stream has learned a lot, and I will never forget this talk, definitely. It's been a
Louis,
huge experience.
I wait for you to come to New York first, and I meet you here, and then together we go to Iran, because we
Of
want to
course.
take the pods to Iran, and that's the
And you
goal.
and your sister are extremely welcome here in Chile, especially in Concepcion.
Thank you
So,
very much. I
no,
send you
thanks
all
to
my
you.
love and respect. Thank you very, very much.
No,
Appreciate it.
thanks to you. And well, I'm going to give you the link of the interview later so you can take a look
Okay.
at
Okay.
after.
Best
Okay.
regards. Have a good evening.
To you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.